Welcome to another episode of Commercial Property Roadshow. You're here with Helen Tarrant, and today I'm actually going to talk about a really important topic: how to pick the right commercial property deal for your first commercial property purchase. So how do you pick the right commercial property deal for you is really important. It doesn't really matter whether it's your first deal, second deal, third deal. The strategies vary, the strategies are different, but how do you pick one that is going to be suitable for you for your current situation? So I'm going to show you a variety of deals. By no means, they're not limited. They're not particular about anything. I just picked them because they randomly landed in my inbox. I mean, I get literally hundreds of them. We have a whole sourcing team that go out and find these properties there, and people on the ground looking at properties. Because being a buyer's agency and education, we've got to have our fingers on the pulse at all times. But coming back to it, how do you pick and what kind of profile will you have in the background to be able to be right for this type of property? So I'm going to show you a selection there, anywhere from, I'm going to take you to Canberra, I'm going to take you to Queensland, I'm going to show you a property in Melbourne. So you get to see all of them, right? And where everything is. And we're just at the start of the year. Things change, things trend differently. It's really important for you to understand. It's important to look at the elements of each and every one of these deals. So I will by no means start with a small property, and we'll start with this one in Melbourne. So this one's in Yarraville in Melbourne. So this is your classic set and forget type of property. It is I believe it is a Pilates studio. So you've got some equipment, but it's open plan. The flooring's been done, but and that is where most of the money is going to be spent by a tenant. It's going to be on the flooring, the reinforcement, because they're going to have people doing things. They're pulling up on a lot of the support mechanism up there as they're doing the Pilates. They're getting their core strength. They've got their machines, which is quite heavy. And so you can see that this one is heavily invested in the fit out. Even though the fit out is not huge, you can see that they've actually done quite a bit in the fit out. And look, I quite like it. It's ground floor retail. It's new. It is your classic first starter property that is set and forget. Now, your yield is not going to be brilliant on this one because it's going to be a Melbourne property. So if you get between 5 to 5.5%, you're doing well. The tenant has been there for a while, so they've been there for 5 to 6 years. So again, they've still got another 3 to 4 years to run on the lease. So in simple set and forget type of property, it's going to be sub 1 mil. A lot of people in the market are buying that, especially as a starter property. That's your starter commercial property. So if you are just not sure about getting into commercial property and you want to dip your toe into it, that's your classic starter property. But if you want to build a portfolio and you're already, got one in place and you want to do something that has uplift potential, something that has a little bit more you can expand or extend on, that's not the right property for you. This property, just simply you buy it, set and forget it. And as the area grows, there'll be uplift in rent, but only as the area grows and there's more demand and more things moving into the area. So that is your classic start out property. Now I'm going to share with you a property in the ACT. Now in the ACT, you have exemption from both the, you have got no land tax and you have no, there is also no stamp duty. So, of course, for most people, the yield might be reflective of that. So it might be a little bit lower as well, depending on that, because this is, again, a sub $1 million property. Now, this property is a property that is a shoe shop that's connected to a podiatrist. So this property itself is actually quite sought after because it's connected to something that is Ally Health. It's at least a lease back property. So you got to make sure the rent is definitely market rent for you to safeguard yourself from any fluctuations in the future and lowering yield. But it's a brand new 5 year lease, and it's a happy fit footwear, has a boardroom, staff breakout room, kitchenette. So it's actually connected to the podiatrist coming out and then people going in there and getting the shoes as well. It's warm shell, high ceilings, good signage, front access. It's a multi-use purpose. So in the future, you can always repurpose that as well. So in the ACT, they work it out a little bit differently. They actually look at, there's 2 layers. There's Crown land purpose, and then there is also the local governing purpose of the land as well. So you've got to make sure that it fits purpose for both. The method of sale is that they want private, it's a private sale, but they've listed it at $755. for that. And for most of you, this may not be suitable because you think it's a retail, but it is retail attached. And with a 5-year lease, that you pass the market, which means that in the future, you can always put a new tenant in there as well. So you're not going to really suffer from a diminishing value in the future as well. And it's block 3, section it's block 4, section 3, and this is the total land size, and that's the building. I believe 114 square meters is the internal space as well, and its own core. So it's private. We've talked about a little bit about the location of the property, so I'm just going to move that up a little bit. But everything basically in the ACT is pretty small. So ACT, it's got very limited stock, and everybody pretty much knows the area, everything within sort of half an hour drive or of each other from one area to the other, and everything. If you're looking at more centers, find local centers, and it's already all planned out and very gentrified. So that's your ACT. There's not really areas that are going through gentrification because everything is really already quite gentrified. And that's really ACT. So the type of property that would suit will be someone who is, again, it's a starter property. There's a property that if you are, want to stretch your deposit further and you don't want to pay the 5% of GST, then ACT is your great starting point. If you are looking at something that is a longer lease, that's going to be the longer lease. But if you don't like retail and you worry about the tenant a little bit, this might not be right for you. But also, if you think in the future you can repurpose that to something else that's more allied health or medical, and you're happy to hold for the moment in the future to change the tenant, then that is right. That is right for you. And of course, you're getting in at a much cheaper. You're saving your 5% in your deposit. And without land tax, of course, then ACT becomes a much better option. So it's choosing, if you're a starting property, we would be looking at something like a Yarraville or an ACT, and looking at the balance and looking at what you're going to look at. Now, in Yarraville probably will give you more capital gains in the future. The ACT one probably slightly less, but you're going to get your capital. It's going to be set and forget and really headacheless for the next 5 years or so going forward. And look, no tenant, even if it's a lease back, will lease back for 5 years if they're not sure that they're absolutely committed to the area. And moving forward from there, I want to show you something that is a little bit different, a little bit more advanced. So this property here is in Wagga. So this is a property in Wagga. It's in Norton Street in Wagga. It is a property that has a couple of different tenants in there. So it's got a good enough footprint, but you can see that it's already quite dated. You can see already potholes in the actual concrete. So there's going to be some things to take care of. It is a warehouse showroom type of property. And obviously it's not going to be perfect when you get it. So let's have a read through it. So this price point here is about, I think that somewhere about 1.1 to 1.2. So again, that takes you past the sub 1 million, goes into a bracket of 1 mil to 1.2 million, which is another bracket that a lot of people are really popular at the moment. So a lot of people go past the 1 million, then that early 1 mil. So again, it's a very popular place. The land is quite significant, almost 1,800 square meters. You've got a good floor space, you've got car space, and it's a tenanted investment property. So you can see that it's 1K. Wagga CBD, 50 metres from Stewart Highway. Now, we've got 4 different tenancies with two street frontages, display in the front units, showroom, warehousing, parking, on-site roller door. So it's got quite a lot going for it. But a property like this, the yield is probably going to be very, very similar, probably a little bit more, a little bit better. And let me have a look at this is the IM we got for you. And hopefully you'll be able to see that. So that's the IM there. You'll be able to see the information. Now, I think it's a great spot. I like Wagga. I like Wagga a lot. It's driven by the military base there. A lot of people move in there. It's 5.5 hours from Sydney, 5.5 hours from Melbourne. So it's a great middle point. I tend to stop at Wagga when I'm driving through. Now, it's doing $85,000 in annum in rent plus GST. What that tells me is that the property is a gross lease and not a net lease. And so we need to work out what exactly is the outgoings. Now, we don't define the outgoings because it's given us $4,700 as the council rates, but what we haven't taken into account is land tax on this, because it's a New South Wales property, and if you hold it in trust, you're literally getting very little or no threshold. And also then you're looking at the insurance on the building, which could be another $5,000 or something like this. So really, when they're looking at that figure it's not 4,794. It's more like 10,000, maybe potentially 12,000 if you take in some land tax and definitely a little bit more than management fees. So it might be work out about 70,000, which makes it about a 6-ish% yield. It might get to 6.5%. So yeah, you have to then again compare that with a yield of a 5 to 5.5 in Melbourne, or something that is going to be in that's in ACT, that's going to be around your 6.5% or 6%. Now, I like the spread of tenants there. And that's what essentially you're paying for in this property, is the spread of tenants. But one of the things that we got to look at here is that they seem to be lower type of tenants. When I say lower type of tenant, I mean they're not sophisticated type of tenants, and certainly not taking a 3 or 5 year lease. Now we've got a 2-year lease, but it elapses later on this year, so we're going to see if they want to renew. But they also have a very small, the lease is very cheap, so wouldn't be hard to basically replace that tenant. They're doing water consumptions and sewage charges. B and C has a catering company, so they're a little bit more, but month to month really worries me. I want to see how long they're doing month to month. And obviously that's a standalone unit, and where they're paying market rent, I really want them on a lease, because that's quite a significant if they do leave. Now then we've got Mitchell Wool, which we don't know from the look at this what they actually do, but they have till 2023, and it looks like they've got a 2-year option as well. So they probably signed on in late 2021. Again, they're paying a very small amount of rent. Their rent is very, very cheap in comparison to the lettable area they have. And then we've got a trucking service, which finishes in 2023. Look, overall spread of tenants are quite good, but there's nil rent reviews. The lease is not great. The lease definitely needs a lot of attention in the next little while to really bring it up to scratch. And whether your tenant actually wants to or not, that's entirely up to your negotiators with the tenant. But it could mean that ultimately you actually have to kick out the tenant and put a new tenant in there. The thing with a property like this is that I often really like properties like this, but it is complicated, and it's often not for the first timer, because when you are trying to do the due diligence on this property, you actually have quite a few different elements. You've got the capital works on this property, so you've got to work out, because it's quite old, how much the capital works is, but more likely, what is the capital works in the next 5 to 7 years, and amortize that and work out if that's worth it. You work out the land tax based on your holdings. You work out how management fees. You work out what's the potential of being able to put your tenant on longer leases, or whether you're going to have to deal with short-term leases for the moment. If you're dealing with short-term leases for the moment, you need to have strong servicing yourself. So you need to be able to do a full documentation loan rather than a lease stock loan. So that type of property is for a full documentation loan. Someone wanting to do a full doc loan, that is the type of property, someone who can tweak it and spend some time with in the future. It would take a 6-month period heavily if you want to tweak it. Maybe if you don't, if you just want to be relaxed and get some cash flow in and then tweak it, it's probably going to be a 12-month period. And it's going to require some active participation. So what I would suggest is that this is probably not your starter property. It's probably for most people either a second property, or they come from a quite an experienced residential background where they've done some developments, they've done some refurbs, they've done some flips, and they're looking for something that is a little bit more of a project and that they can work on for a little bit, and then they can set and forget it. And for us, if we're not the first time investors like myself or my colleagues, this is the type of property we'll tend to pick, because it's freestanding. It's a property that we know that it's relatively cheap because it's early 1 mil, but it also has a lot of potential that we can tweak, but we've got to be mindful of the capital cost. So whether that's right for you, we would not necessarily, depending on how your situation is, might not necessarily pick that as your first property, because it's not an easy property. But if something you're willing to work at, something you're willing to learn, and if you want to have a bash at it and really sort of get a good solid foundation and have a property that you can probably keep for a long, long time, then that would be the property for you. The other ones you can still keep, but at some point you may want to upgrade to a property like this, where it's got a little bit more potential overall. Now, finally, I'm going to share with you something that's on the totally the other end, which is something that is going to be a lot more high risk. And for someone who is coming in there, even if it's their first property, they might come from a developer background. Cash flow may not be important to them. Doing an uplift might be more important to them. For all those reasons, they might think this is the right type of property deal. So this is a property in Townsville. So it's in St. John. Mount St. John is actually quite established in Townsville, but this property is a bus company and a bus depot. And it is actually a property that is going to be sold on vacant possession. So if it's vacant possession, you need to have a strong financial background, or you're going to be able to take on a no-doc loan, which only goes for a year, which then allows you then to spend that year doing up the property and then essentially flicking it. Property like this would also be ideal on putting a call and put option on there. But as you know, that in a seller's market, it is harder to find a property someone will give you a delayed settlement over something that is in when it's a buyer's market, where you can have a lot more of these call and put options, delayed settlements. So let's just have a look at the property itself. It's quite a bit of large land. It's over 4,000 square meters. The building is still quite small in comparison, so you can always extend on that or build another one in the future potentially. So you could potentially split this site into two if you want to be a little bit more creative. There's a land tax component, they've did the insurance, and they did the rates, which is really good because that's everything, right? They're asking for 1.1 million, but there is a GST component or an ex-GST, which we're going to have to sort out because we don't know if the current tenants there are paying GST or not. But you can see some photos of this property, and you can see that it has got high clearance. It's got the nice location, but then you can see that in some of that they've got buses parked underneath, so they've got the high clearance for them, and they've got the office spaces. And mainly when it's vacated, you might need to do a little bit of works, but it probably isn't going to be a huge amount. Most of it is going to be this parking and bitumen area where it's probably going to suit a logistics company, or more likely, if it's not going to fit the logistic company, might fit someone who's in transportation, someone who is maybe they can even do, create areas where they can do sort of caravan and boat parking, and also they can have a little office space they can run out of. They do all sorts of things because this is probably a medium to high impact industrial, and there's a lot more options for you as well. But this one is for someone who has a lot more higher risk. So if you're in the high risk category, and this is where you want to be, and you're in the high risk category because you actually want to do a project and you want to spend time on it, this is the type of deal you would do. For most of our clients, this is their third or fourth deal because they already have a cash flow base. And it's important to have a cash flow base because not on top of what you're going to be putting in to settle the property, or even if it's settled on an extended settlement, there's still money to come up, like marketing fees to lease it, leasing incentives, as well as leasing fees to the agent. And of course, to attract a tenant, you might want to, fix up bits and pieces there. So there's still some money to be spent on the property. And if you can get a delayed settlement, that reduces your outgoing and holding costs and allows you a period to be able to lease up the property as well. So that's for a property like that. That's probably one of the strategies I will put in place. But of course, I'm going to be looking at an overall view when I'm picking the first property that is right for you. Now, depending on your risk profile, depending on what you already have in your portfolio, depending on what you're looking for to achieve, whether it's cash flow or growth or a flip project and chunk deals, I'm going to pick a property that, when I sift through all of this, that matches what you want. And that's one of the essences about being a good buyer's agent, is not just giving you a deal because it came through, but matching a deal to your criteria, but matching a deal with a strategy behind it so that you can grow from one deal to the next deal to the next deal. So I hope this has been enlightening for you to have a look at all the deals that's out there. I mean, this is just a very, very small snapshot of the different type of deals. You can choose for yourself which one you actually like, but it gives you an idea of, to start out, start with something simple that you can get your head around how to do a commercial property deal and the due diligence. Once you get your head around that, go over something a little bit more advanced, a little bit more tricky, where you have to negotiate leases, work on capital costs, and swap out tenants, and then go to something that is vacant, where it's going to be coming in, doing everything at once, getting a tenant in there and then flipping it or refinancing it, whichever way you prefer to grow your portfolio. Either way, there is a pathway, and there's going to be an individual, unique pathway to you, and I can help you set that up. So if that's what you're interested in, is not just the run-of-the-mill commercial property, but something that is going to help you grow your portfolio and really grow your wealth, then reach out to me, helen@commercialpropertycashflow.com.au, or reach out to me at helentarrant.com, and let's jump on a strategy call, or leave me a comment below and let's start chatting. Let me help you build passive income through commercial property. Bye for now.